I'm Pastor Vivian.
And I'm Pastor John.
Welcome to our podcast, The More Things Change. Oh, and this is Bam Bam, who just decided he needed to be here.
Right.
Clearly, we're not going to be terribly formal about these things. We're just talking about the whole armor of God, the book of Ephesians this week.
Right.
We've done a couple of them now, so what are we up to now?
Well, we're up to shoes and shield. That's what we're talking about today.
It was belt and Bible, and then,
Belt and breastplate last week,
and
then shoes and shield. And again, we're putting on this, what appears to be defensive armor, but as we've gone through the last 2 weeks, we realize that it isn't just defensive, that it gives us some power, as it were, to be out in the world. And that's the whole point of these podcasts, is we're talking not just about doing a little Bible analysis, though that wouldn't be so bad, I guess, but
why does it matter? What does it have to do with me?
Yeah, what does it have to do with me? And in these particularly difficult times now, these weird times that we're in, thought it might just be useful to go through what Paul had to say with a bunch of people in his day who were facing a whole bunch of weird stuff too. Yeah. So, should I read the Bible portion now?
Go right ahead,
and
sure.
We can get started. I'm going to start with verse 10 in Ephesians chapter 6 and go through the shoes and the shield. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His power. Put on the whole armor of God so that you I'm going to start again. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His power. Put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, so that you may be able to withstand on that evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand therefore and fasten the belt of truth around your waist, and put on the breastplate of righteousness. As shoes for your feet, put on whatever will make you ready to proclaim the gospel of peace. With all of these, take the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the flaming arrows of the evil one. So there we go.
Shoes and shield.
Shoes and shield.
Although he doesn't actually say, I should have looked up the Greek, but he doesn't say put on the shoes of the gospel of peace. He says put on whatever's going to make you ready to proclaim the gospel.
Right. That's in a different translation, the New International Version. It's whatever will make you prepared to go out with the gospel of peace.
And this is the theme for Paul. In another letter he says, you should always be ready to give an account or give a reason, tell your story why you follow Jesus. And I think we don't do that. We're looking at a world where I just had it come up recently in a Bible study that I was leading, where somebody said, well, when I was growing up, we all behaved nicely, and now there don't seem to be any rules. And I said, well, you're expecting Christian behavior from non-Christians. And she said, well, you don't have to be Christian to behave well. No, you don't. But we specifically have values that say, this is how you behave if you're going to follow Jesus. Other people may not. That just may not be something that they think they're obligated to do.
Right. And when people are getting ready to go out the door in the morning and face the world, is there a consciousness of an intentional way of acting and being in that world, as Paul recommends, by these shoes of peace, if you will, being able to be prepared with the gospel of peace, as opposed to being intentionally armed with something perhaps a little more vicious, or honestly, I hate to say it this way, but for a lot of people, not really even thinking about it. What am I armed with when I go out the house this morning?
I was doing stuff.
Right, you're going out in your socks, you're going, whatever it is. We make light of it, but I think it's a real serious problem that we just kind of coast. And we don't think about what might be necessary outside the front doors of our home. What might be something that would allow us to interact with the world in this way of peace? that Christ, the gospel of peace, to act in a Christ-like fashion in the world.
So why do we have the shoes of the gospel of peace in the middle of a bunch of armor?
Well,
I mean, it's not exactly like the rest of it. I've got a shield, and then peace, and I got a belt of truth. I mean, I've got all this defensive, and we're going to get to weapons next week, but here I've got all this stuff to fight. Why in the world have I got peace in the middle?
Well, I've wondered about that. Why did Paul bring that up in the middle of this here? You could go down sort of the practical route, which is he might be realizing that he's got all these armaments, lined up, and maybe this would be a good time to introduce a way to bear those armaments, not as offensive weapons. No, I see. I'm not convincing you at all.
No, you're not. And because I'm sitting there going, why did he put that on the feet? What is it about being on the feet? Again, he starts out by saying, you're not going against people, you're going against principalities and powers, which comes up again in Romans, right? So what is it that he's trying to tell us? It's on our feet for why? So we have good solid footing in the world, so that we don't stumble and fall, to make sure that our foundation's good, maybe?
Well, I think the word foundation is where we're going with...
Could be. I'm going someplace different in my sermon, but that's okay.
You tell me where you're going in your sermon.
And give it away. Got to come on Sunday.
There you go. Washougal United Methodist Church.
No, but
apparently my sermon on Sunday, I don't know.
We're always different, so what does it matter? Salmon Creek.
Yeah.
So anyway, the shoes. Okay, what do shoes do? They make sure that you have good footing. They're better than barefoot. You can stumble and fall in bare feet or bad shoes, but they also take you out in the world, and shoes allow you to go on different surfaces equally effectively. I mean, that's the purpose of shoes, right?
Well, that's true. You can walk on rocks, or you can walk on asphalt, or you can walk on whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas you might not be able to do that in your socks.
That's true, in your socks especially.
Well,
and we all know those Roman wore socks.
I'm stuck on socks today.
I guess you are.
Okay.
But yeah, what is the purpose of shoes, and why did he choose that?
Yeah. Well, you're right. That is the purpose of shoes. But again, I'm going to go back to my foundational thing because, and he talks about being, let me see, as shoes for your feet, put on whatever will make you ready to proclaim the gospel of peace. So you could be putting on sandals, or, we're talking metaphors here, obviously. But you could be, in other words, whatever it is that you foundationally prepare to go out into the world with, be prepared with the gospel of peace. All right?
Well, it's your job to take it to the world. I mean, this is something
that's
that
true
a lot
also.
of Christians, I think, have just abandoned. We talk about, I want to grow my church. Mostly they mean I want bodies there who agree with me, who will give me money, come to church, do good volunteer work, but won't change anything I like.
Oh, isn't that what church is all about?
Yeah.
Wow, I better go back to seminary.
I'm
sorry, but
we've lost the Great Commission. Go into the world, be my witnesses, baptize people, and teach them to obey me. Boy,
Right.
we're Methodists. A lot of Methodists don't like to hear that. You mean I got to talk about my faith? It's private.
Right.
Is it?
Right. Well, no, I don't think Paul is urging his folks in the same way, right?
You mean Paul told him to do what Jesus told him to do?
It's really weird, but it's funny. All throughout Paul's writings, he does that. What a radical. Right? But that's right. He is, I guess maybe what I'm saying is the phenomena of people being reluctant to talk about their faith or to bring their faith in a real way and to bring the gospel in a real way into the world isn't new necessarily to the 21st century.
No.
Clearly, for early Christians, there was a fear of talking about their faith because they could have been killed.
Yeah, but they did it. Oddly enough, the ones most likely to die are most likely to do it.
That's right. That's funny.
It's true in Africa. It was true for Dietrich Bonhoeffer in World War II.
Right.
So what is it about that? The more comfortable your faith makes you, the more everyone around you agrees with you, the less willing you are to talk about it. What's up with that?
Yeah. Well, there's this drive to kind of conform to society. I talked about that at my church, Salmon Creek United Methodist Church, last week, about Christians are meant to be set apart. Jesus says it pretty much specifically. Paul says it several times. And part of this putting on the armor of God as we go out into the world is to kind of a recognition that we're set apart, that we actually might do things different than what's socially popular or what's acceptable.
Not only might, sometimes we should. That's our call, really. I mean, this is the faith, and not that shoes aren't important, but we haven't mentioned the shield of faith.
Right.
How is your faith a shield? I mean, we really don't talk about what is faith. Is it an intellectual, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. I like Tony Dungy. I think maybe it was Tony Dungy. You got to be more than
the
a
football
fan.
coach, right?
Yeah, but you got to be more than a fan of Jesus. Yeah, Jesus is just all right with me.
Yeah.
If you're just showing up on Sunday morning, or you listen to somebody on a podcast that makes you feel good, you're just a fan, not a follower. And Jesus really wants you to do more. Bonhoeffer is clear. Faith and obedience go together. You cannot separate them.
Right.
If you're not obeying Jesus and doing things that make you uncomfortable, like witnessing, you're not really following Jesus. You're not really a Christian.
Right, and how far will we go? I mean, you know, for those maybe not familiar with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, he's a Lutheran martyr in World War II.
Yeah.
Killed by the Nazis. And he ministered while in prison.
He would not allow the Nazis to take over the Lutheran Church. They did, but he set up his own seminary and his own flavor or denomination of Lutheranism that did not allow Hitler to change the confessions and change the meaning. Like right now in China, they're doing the same thing. Instead of banning the church, they take it over. And in China, they're rewriting the Bible. So the story where Jesus catches the woman in adultery and, you know, writes in the sand and says, "He is without sin, cast the first stone," and then sits down, writes in the dirt. And everybody leaves. And then Jesus stands up and says, "Where'd your accusers? Is there nobody left to accuse you?" And she says, "No." And he then says,
Go and sin no more.
"Right, neither do I accuse you." No, according to the new communist Chinese Bible, Jesus says, "But the law is the law and must be upheld," and he stones her to death.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, but that's what Hitler was trying to do.
Right.
There are millions of Chinese Christians standing up against that, worshiping anyway, carefully protecting the true Bible, the true Word of God that they have. But if they are found with it, they'll be sent to prisons and probably executed.
Right. No.
What are we complaining about?
Well, I know. And it's interesting in America because in a way it's a little bit the opposite. We've come out of this long period where Christianity and society were generally in tune. It's called Christendom, right? And so you could kind of go to church and let it be a spectator sport, and you wouldn't really be resisting society too much either by being a Christian.
We're a nice person.
As long as you were a nice person, but that's just not true anymore. And I realize sometimes this is difficult for people to appreciate or understand, but we don't live in Christendom anymore.
No.
And suddenly just being comfortable isn't enough. It's not an expression of your faith. It doesn't carry the gospel out into the world.
So how is your faith a shield then? Because the death of many Christians in the first century, including some who were the first hearers of this letter, they died. They were killed. So what's Paul talking about?
Why don't you tell me?
Oh.
I know. But we live as Christians, we live in a reality that goes beyond death. That's something that's really also fundamental to Christian faith that often gets lost, I think, in these days. That we are so focused on changing this world or doing work in this world and, tinkering with the engines and the machines that make this world go, that we forget or set aside this eternal protection offered by Christ.
Yeah. And I think it's more than that. It can't just be pie in the sky in the great by and by.
No.
It's like the Lord's Prayer. Jesus said, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." To me, faith, well, let's go to John Wesley, is the strange warming of the heart. It's the inner certainty. I belong to God. My deepest truth is that I'm God's. And it doesn't, I mean, whatever else I'm asked to do, I need to always be doing a better job of living into that. And when I do, something within me is changed and it feels good. And I feel stronger. Like Paul, even if they were to arrest me, nobody can touch that part of me.
Right.
Nobody can. They can kill me, as Paul witnessed, as Christ's on the cross. They could kill him. They can't destroy that.
Right, but I think these two concepts are linked.
They are.
Because you talk about Wesley, right,
Yeah.
on board the ship. He's there out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He's crossing over to America, and the ship starts to go down, or he thinks it's going to go down, and Wesley is panicking. And this group of Moravians come up to the deck. They've been on the ship, and they stand around and they sing hymns.
Yeah.
And Wesley's transformation was a little longer than that one incident, but that was a way in which he got that shield of faith, not having to fear what this world could bring.
Right. I mean, I'm sure as they sang hymns, that's the shield of faith.
Right.
It also isn't just something spontaneous. They came together as a congregation, as it were, and they did what believers have done throughout the ages. They sang hymns that encouraged one another, that reminded them that, I don't know, but a mighty fortress is our God. And, the
I don't know what they
I don't know
sang.
what they sang, but it was probably words about, I'm going to be okay. I mean, that's what Luther's great hymn is about.
Right.
A fortress. God's a fortress. I may have fear, but things will be okay. I believe this. Faith is obedience. Faith, God both gives it. I guess it's like our muscles. They're there, but we have to strengthen them through exercise and what we choose to do, to read, to listen to. Make sense?
It does make sense, and hence the shield, right?
Yeah.
And again, as we were trying to talk about how things are the same now, again, the need for that shield in this world. Clearly, in Paul's world, he's talking about whatever was attacking them and that need for faith, and it hasn't dissipated.
Again, it's a shield not against other people,
No,
but against the evil powers. The
Right,
fiery darts of the evil one was
the
what.
cosmic powers of this present darkness,
Yeah.
Paul says.
So they're going to hurtle things at you, but if you look beyond the person that says those things or tweets those things or whatever, you look at what's beneath, what's beyond. There's more, what is Shakespeare's line? There's more to heaven and earth than are
Is
dreamt of
in your philosophy, Horatio.
Yes. So there's more. I mean, Shakespeare stole from Paul. Okay.
Everybody steals from Paul. We're
Yeah.
stealing from Paul.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, there's more there. And our goal as Christians is not to angrily strike back, but to offer them a way out. Now, maybe it won't work. Maybe like Jesus in front of Pilate, we'll just eventually stand silent. When Pilate does his thing and Jesus stops talking to him, sometimes I wonder in his exhaustion and pain if he was thinking, well, I told him not to throw their pearls before swine. It's not going to work,
Right.
There's no point. But you can live your faith, but you have to defend your faith.
Well, right. And there's a certain aspect of that of knowing what your faith is. Partly that's as pastors, that's what we, well, it is a concern, particularly from the spectator sport aspect of
Yeah.
going to church. You know, it's not, I've never thought that people needed to be able to quote 1,000 passages from the Bible. That's not faith, that's knowledge. It might lead to faith, but that direct encounter with Christ, or that openness to Christ's presence,
Yeah.
is what can plant that seed of faith to grow within you, eventually perhaps sprouting into shoes. I don't know, but
Well, it gives you firm footing if
Yeah,
you know
firm
what you
footing,
believe
yeah.
and why. I
Exactly.
mean, that prepares you to take the gospel of peace into the world.
right,
I think a lot of our folks don't really know. Their faith is sincere and true,
oh yes,
but they don't know. They've never really thought about it, so they don't know how to talk about it, and they don't know what to say. They don't know how, as Paul says, to give an accounting of what they believe. You know, Jesus died for my sins and rose from the dead, and somebody says, "What does that mean?
right,
What does that mean?" And you go,
right, because we used to live with a bunch of people who knew what that meant.
Yeah,
But-
we all agreed.
Right.
But they don't now. They
Right.
don't know what it means, and neither do we. Too many of us. So yeah, we got to figure out. That means that my second chances are endless, as long as I'm sincerely trying to obey God,
right,
bringing God's truth into the world, bringing God's goodness and love into the world,
right,
offering other people the same second chance. You know, it's like somebody who goes to rehab. So often they have to go through rehab 2, 3, 4 times before it really takes. Hello, that's what our faith is like. We all have parts of us. For some people, it's having the courage to go out and invite somebody to come to church to hear about Jesus. You're not brave enough to do that. Maybe it'll take you thinking about it for a long time. That's your rehab. It's okay.
right,
It takes the time that it takes. Just keep working on it.
right. It kind of reminds me of that Alison Krauss song about living prayer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That we can go into action, but that action is part and parcel of faith. In other words, there's going to the food kitchen, which, as you said right at the beginning of the broadcast, anybody can do something good,
Yeah.
or going to the food kitchen with Christ at the tip of your tongue, ready to go.
Right.
You know.
You don't
So
have to
that's,
stop people on the street, but if somebody, like you're at the food kitchen, at the food bank, and somebody says, "Why are you doing this?" Be able to tell them, because Jesus tells me to help everybody, no matter what they believe. You know, and then it might be, well, what do you mean? Why don't you come to church sometime? Because it kind of comes out over time. I can give you a little bit, but it's learning how to do that and why it matters.
Right. So it's interesting as we go through this whole armor. Next week, I think we have the helmet.
Of salvation.
The helmet of salvation. But in the last paragraph of that section in the Bible, Paul talks about prayer as this, I don't know, this ignition system for everything he's talking about. So, so as you can see, we've been building this up week after week to go through these separate things. And next week, the helmet of salvation, and I'm forgetting what the other one is,
The sword of the Spirit.
Sword of the Spirit, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that'll be fun. Maybe we can get some of those Nerf swords next week. But in any event, culminating in this idea of prayer is really where we're headed.
Yeah. I'm going to quote a non-Christian now.
Uh-oh.
Gandhi. Prayer is not an old woman's idle mutterings, but when done right, is the most powerful weapon in the universe. Something along those lines.
Well, Gandhi clearly was just quoting Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us again this week. And we'll see you next week on our next episode of The More Things Change.
God bless.